Hello everyone, we're on chapter 10 and we're on paragraph 3. But in doing this, he has already gone beyond the stage of naive consciousness into the sphere where the moral laws have become independently existing standards. They are no longer carried by real bearers, but have become metaphysical entities existing in their own right. They are analogous to the visible forces of metaphysical realism, which does not seek reality through the part of it that man has in his thinking, but hypothetically adds it on to actual experience. These extra-human moral standards occur always as accompanying features of metaphysical realism. For metaphysical realism is bound to seek the origin of morality in the sphere of extra-human reality. Here there are several possibilities. If the hypothetically assumed entity is conceived as in itself unthinking, acting according to purely mechanical laws, as materialism would have it, then it must also produce out of itself, by purely mechanical necessity, the human individual with all his characteristic features. The consciousness of freedom can then be nothing more than an illusion. For though I consider myself the author of my action, it is the matter of which I am composed and the movements going on in it that are working in me. I believe myself free, but in fact all my actions are nothing but the result of the material processes which underlie my physical and mental organization. It is said that we have the feeling of freedom only because we do not know the motives compelling us. And here's a quote: "We must emphasize that the feeling of freedom is due to the absence of external compelling motives. Our action is necessitated as is our thinking." In paragraph 3 is summarized as follows: when naive realism does this, that is, the inner power known as conscious, it is entering the sphere of metaphysics. Metaphysics seeks the origin of morality in an extra-human reality. One possible origin is that we operate purely by mechanical laws, and therefore the individual and their personality is produced by mechanical necessity. Therefore the perception of freedom is merely an illusion, as it is merely the result of mechanical laws. According to this, my freedom is merely based on the idea that all of my actions are just the result of the material processes that underlie my physical and mental organization. Okay, so in paragraph 1 and 2, Steiner was talking about how the naive realist forms a conception of morality, and it leads them to the concept of having a conscience, which a conscience ends up being a sort of non-physical reality, and he is, as Steiner's saying, he's going beyond this stage of naive consciousness, because you can't touch or see or hear your conscience the way you can, say, material objects. So he's already making the naive realist is already taking their morality to the level of metaphysics. And in this paragraph, he just points out that because the naive realism leads to metaphysics, they're going to seek the origin of morality, and one way they do it is through just saying our morality is merely the result of mechanical laws, and therefore the individual and their personality is produced by these mechanical laws. And the flaw with that, as Steiner points out, is just it points out that freedom is just merely an illusion. And for Steiner's argument, he doesn't believe freedom is an illusion. He believes freedom is a reality. These people are arguing that freedom is just merely based on these processes that are going on within us, these mechanical processes, and it's really, this concept is just an illusion, and that's what he's pointing out in this paragraph. So what Steiner is doing, as he's pointed out in, I believe it was chapter 7, he pointed out how the theories of naive realism and metaphysical realism, that their theories, if they were carried out consistently, they would fall apart. And so he's pointing out here now again how these theories, how their conception, how they express morality, how they argue this is morality, how they seek the origin of morality. He's pointing out again if it's consistently followed out, the flaws of that. And so that's what he's doing in this paragraph as well, just pointing out the flaws in the naive realist and what it leads to metaphysical realist. And we're going to go on to paragraph 4. Another possibility is that a man may picture the extra-human absolute that lies behind the world of appearances as a spiritual being. In this case, he will also seek the impulse for his actions in a corresponding spiritual force. He will see the moral principles to be found in his own reason as the expression of this being itself, which has its own special intentions with regard to man. To this kind of dualist, the moral law appears to be dictated by the absolute, and all that man has to do is use his intelligence to find out the decisions of the absolute being and then carry them out. The moral world order appears to the dualist as the perceptible reflection of a higher order standing behind it. Earthly morality is the manifestation of the extra-human world order. It is not man that matters in this moral order, but the being itself, that is, the extra-human entity. Man shall do as this being wills. Edward von Hartmann, who imagines this being as a Godhead, whose very existence is a life of suffering, believes that this divine being has created the world in order thereby to gain release from his infinite suffering. Hence, this philosopher regards the moral evolution of humanity as a process which is there for the redemption of God. Only through the building up of a moral world order by intelligent, self-conscious individuals can the world process be led towards its goal. True existence is the incarnation of the Godhead. The world process is the passion of the incarnated Godhead, and at the same time the way of redemption for him who was crucified in the flesh. Morality, however, is the collaboration in the shortening of this path of suffering and redemption. Here, man does not act because he wants to, but he shall act because it is God's will to be redeemed. Whereas the materialistic dualist makes man an automaton whose actions are only the result of a purely mechanical system, the spiritualistic dualist, that is, one who sees the absolute, the being in itself, as something spiritual in which man has no share in his conscious experience, makes him a slave to the will of the absolute. As in materialism, so also in one-sided spiritualism. In fact, in any kind of metaphysical realism, inferring but not experiencing something extra-human as the true reality, freedom is out of the question. And paragraph 4 is summarized as follows. Another possible origin of morality for the metaphysician is that there is a spiritual being behind the world of appearances. An individual sees the moral principles that he can find in his reason as an expression of this being, and so the person merely carries out these laws of this being, that is, God. What matters in this moral order is the being, not humans. Edward von Hartmann believes that this divine being created the world to gain release from his infinite suffering. This philosophy is known as spiritual dualist and essentially makes one a slave to the will of the absolute, that is, God. For this conception, the idea of freedom is out of the question. So in this paragraph, he points out that for the another explanation for the metaphysical realists of the origin of morality lies in behind the world of appearance as a spiritual being. So it's, for example, it's a God that is telling us what to do, basically, and what we have to do is figure out what this being wants us to do. That is, follow the will of God. And according to this theory, I mean, freedom is not a possibility. It's not even in the question, and that's what Steiner's pointing out. And Edward von Hartmann, his theory is just that, this will of God is really to end their suffering, and so we just have to help out in ending this suffering. That's a pretty pessimistic philosophy, but that's just what he's pointing out in this paragraph as well about what Edward von Hartmann. That's all we're going to cover for today. I'm probably going to talk in the next session a little bit more about these two paragraphs because we're just running out of time. So keep summarizing and have a good day. Bye.